and prevail in your fantasy football league with the help of our starting lineup. At host to quarterback the show, we have Nick Giacobbe. Up next, a dual threat in Dynasty and Daily Fantasy, we have Cody Repass. And finally, working the waiver wire, we have Nick Cap. These are your playmakers that will provide you with sleepers, breakouts, and busts to help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome to episode 3 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast, where we predict, pick, and help you prevail in your fantasy leagues throughout the 2021 fantasy football season. I'm your host this week and every week for the next 18 weeks or so, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me as always are my partners, my teammates. First off, Cody Repass.
How's it going, Nick? We have finally arrived. Week 1 is here.
We're right there, and also with us every week is Nick Capsalis.
How's it going, guys? Big Thursday night game. Looking forward to the season kicking off, finally.
It's Tuesday. Our Tuesday show is normally going to be a waiver wire heavy show and previewing Thursday Night Football, but because it's kickoff week, we have a really fun show planned for you guys. We're going to talk about our favorite players at each position. We're going to talk about Thursday Night Football, give you our over-unders for each fantasy player, and kind of like a little start-sit type thing to help you guys decide on your lineups for Thursday night. And at the end, we're going to have a very special segment, our biggest sleeper of the year that we've all drafted in 4 out of 5 leagues or so. We're going to tell you who our breakout guy is, and we're going to see if that guy is indeed a breakout at the end of the season. But before we get into the show, if you do want to support us, and please do, you can listen to the audio on basically every major podcast platform. Anchor is actually uploading us to everywhere, but most people are probably going to use either Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Google Podcast if you're on an Android. So if you are listening to us on the audio, especially on Apple, please give us a 5-star review. It actually does mean a lot and helps us boost up the charts. You can watch us live on YouTube. We do a lot of work with these graphics and the live video. So if you do want to watch us on YouTube, that's where you find the video, and all the links are going to be in our Linktree. And if you do enjoy the show, please tell your friends, send them texts, send them to your fantasy leagues, tweet about it, use social media. Speaking of social media, if you do want to follow us, we're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at PrimeTimeFFPod. You could also find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. So please, again, follow us on all social media, and we'll follow you guys back and we'll interact. So if you have any direct questions for us, send it on social media. That's the best way to get in touch with the podcast and with all 3 of us. We're also going to do a live show every Sunday. This Sunday is the first Sunday we're doing it, 11 a.m. Eastern time. It's going to go on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. You can watch us on any of those links, and we're going to give you some daily fantasy picks. I'm playing daily fantasy this year. $100 is going into that at the beginning of the season, so Cody's going to help me with that. We're each going to give you a daily fantasy lineup to help you with that starting at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And if you have any last-minute fantasy questions, hop in the chat, and we're going to help you out. If you're wondering who to play week 1 or any week after that, hop in our live stream, and we're going to give you that. We have an hour from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern time, so that's all the ways you could support us, and please do, because we do appreciate your support so far throughout the season. Before we do get into the show, I have one other thing. We did run a poll over the weekend as to who had the best draft. We did our draft recap on Friday. Nick Cap, I want to congratulate you on achieving the best. I think the poll was at 59% in your favor or something like that, followed by Cody at 30-something%, and then I'm at a quick 9. So you're doubting me. I see all of you. I see all of you doubting me. I'm coming for your head. Guys. I'm coming for your head, all of you. I'm quoting that poll at the end of the season when I win that league.
Look, week 1, anyone that's played fantasy knows that your first week lineup will not be your playoff lineup. So, happy to go in with a good draft, but that lineup's going to change every single week.
It probably will, but we're going to kick it off with our first segment, and we're going to talk about who we think is the top of every single position in the fantasy world. So first off, let's talk about the quarterbacks, the guys that are going to man the ship for each NFL team. And Cody, let's start with you. Who do you think is the number 1 fantasy quarterback heading into the season, or actually who's going to finish as the number 1 fantasy quarterback by week 18?
For me, I'm going a little risky. I think it's Kyler Murray. Last year, finished as quarterback 2. Super inefficient year. Was not accurate. There was multiple games where he just could not hit the broadside of a barn. Luckily, DeAndre Hopkins catches everything that's thrown his way. This year, I think he's going to be more accurate. He is a guy that truly can break fantasy football with his legs, his rushing upside, DFS target, fantasy target, whether it's season long, dynasty, keeper, whatever. Kyler Murray is, to me, the number one quarterback in fantasy football this year.
All right, Nick, you also agree with Cody that Kyler is going to be the number one fantasy target. So let's jump to you before I unleash a fury onto this ridiculous argument, in my opinion. So, Nick, why do you believe that Kyler Murray is going to be the number one fantasy quarterback by week 18?
Yeah, piggybacking right off of Cody. I mean, Kyler Murray, he is a dual threat quarterback. He is an elite running back, playing the quarterback position. He, in my opinion, has one of the better arms for one of these shorter quarterbacks in the league. Out of the mobile quarterbacks, he's entering year 3. He has that rushing upside. He is a dominant passer. He has an elite wide receiver, one, in my opinion, the best wide receiver in football. Kyler Murray has all the makings of what can be an MVP caliber quarterback in this league, and his fantasy production is going to meet that standard. I predict that this year Kyler Murray is going to have an MVP type season, and I think you're going to see the end result by week 18 when he finishes at the quarterback 1.
You predicted MVP type season for Kyler Murray. I predict the MVP season for Josh Allen. Josh Allen was your number one fantasy quarterback last year. I think he repeats that. Josh Allen had 4,500 yards, 37 touchdowns. That's 5th in the league with both. I think he breaks those records pretty well. I think he's going to get 4,500 plus yards. There's 18 games this year, so there's an extra game. So I think he gets close to 5,000 yards. I think he's going to go over 40 throwing touchdowns. His offense only got better. They didn't lose anybody. They still have Stephon Diggs, as you just crowned him. Diggs. I believe that Diggs is one of the best receivers in the league. I think he led the league in receiving yards last year, if I'm correct on that one. I think Gabriel Davis is going to have a giant leap. They added Emmanuel Sanders, he's older, but he could still burn. So I think Allen's going to have a lot more throwing targets. And you want to speak about a dual threat quarterback. He had 8 rushing touchdowns all 3 of his seasons and over 400 rushing yards all 3 of his seasons. So I think he repeats that too. That's a guy that's going to get 8 rushing touchdowns, 6 points per touchdown. That's a lot of fantasy points. And he was 4th in rushing yards last year behind Cam Newton, Taysom Hill, and Kyler Murray. Cam Newton's not in the league at the moment. Taysom Hill is behind Jameis Winston. So you might be looking at right here the number 1 and 2 rushing quarterbacks in the league. And I just think Josh Allen's going to have an easier schedule, easier opponents, and he's going to have an MVP type season. So that's why Josh Allen, to me, is going to become the number 1 fantasy quarterback by week 18. Let's kick it off to wide receivers, the guys that these guys are going to be throwing the ball to. So, Nick, we're going to start with you this time. DK Metcalf, he's one of my guys. I love DK. I was going to wear a DK shirt today, but I didn't. So, Nick, why do you believe that DK Metcalf in year 3 is going to be the number 1 fantasy wide receiver by the end of the season?
DK Metcalf has all the makings of a young Calvin Johnson. He is elite size, elite speed, an elite catcher, even though he's got, the brick hands, from a couple bad plays. He's going to meet Jalen Ramsey, which is going to be 2 tough games on the year. But DK Metcalf is set up in year 3 with this let Russ cook movement with the new offensive coordinator, in my opinion, to have an elite season. I think Russell Wilson, he's not someone we talked about in the last segment, but I think he is also going to have an MVP type year. I think that DK Metcalf has the potential to finish as the number 1 wide receiver. And there's something in my gut that's been telling me that DK Metcalf will be able to mount, sit at the top of the mountain come the end of the season. And I truly do believe that, all the makings that DK has results in him being the wide receiver 1 come the end of the season.
Cody, you chose a guy that was on my fantasy team last year that tortured Nick, and a guy that you drafted this year. And I called him the biggest steal of the draft last week, and I still think he is. So why do you believe that Tyreek Hill will be the number 1 wide receiver by the end of week 18?
Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes makes everyone better. Tyreek Hill's great on his own. He's got unbelievable speed, unrivaled speed. Can stop, turn, twist, and burst on a dime, and that's what makes him so elite. There's other people that are as fast as he is. Nobody can stop and go like Tyreek Hill can. You pair him with a quarterback in Mahomes that's any throw on the football field is within reach. Tyreek Hill is just, he doesn't miss any games. He's durable. He's always a risk to break a long touchdown at any minute. And for me, I think the Patrick Mahomes connection is what pushes him over the top for me. Nick G's is the guy I almost went with, but for me, Patrick Mahomes, I'll take him over who Nick's going to talk about in just a minute. His quarterback any day.
Well, the Falcons drafted Justin Fields, right? Isn't that who they drafted? The Atlanta kid?
Yeah.
They did, right? I'm going to talk about Calvin Ridley. He's a guy I don't have in any leagues this year. I was wrong about him last year. I said that he was going to be he was drafted too high last year before the season. I was 100% wrong on that, and he proved me wrong with 1,374 yards, tied with Devontae Adams, 4th in the league, 9 touchdowns, 9th in the league. The touchdowns could be a little bit better. He did miss a game, but he was 4th in wide receivers when it comes to fantasy points, and that's pretty huge to me. I don't remember who the other 3 were. I should have looked them up, honestly. I believe it's Devontae Adams, Diggs, and maybe Jefferson. I don't know if actually Tyreek was probably in there. I don't think DK was. Ridley only had 90 receptions last year. And if you want to compare that, Hopkins, Diggs, and Adams each had 115 plus receptions. That's 25 more receptions than Ridley did. If Ridley gets those 25 receptions, I think he's the number 1 fantasy receiver last year. And that's why I think this year becomes that number 1 receiver. There's no Julio Jones to eat up those targets. Obviously, they have a big tight end coming in. But that doesn't bother me because Julio's targets have to be split. And I think Ridley's going to take a huge step into that elite category when it comes to wide receivers. Those Falcons are going to be playing from behind the whole season. The defense is not very good. Ryan's going to have to throw that ball around. And I think Ridley's going to catch a lot of those passes. So I'm pretty confident that Ridley could be that. I think we could call him a dark horse because if you ask most people this question, it'll be Tyreek, it'll be Devontae Adams, Diggs, and Nick has a nice dark horse over there too. But I think Ridley's a really nice dark horse here to end up being the number 1 fantasy wide receiver at the end of the season. And I'm kind of jealous that I don't have him in any of my leagues. We're going to go to running backs now, and this one's pretty we got the number 1 and 2 ADP drafted guys here, and Jonathan Taylor. So Nick, I'm going to kick it to you first. Jonathan Taylor's ADP is currently at 9 right now, and 8 or 9 depending on the league. A couple injuries on the Colts offense, but why do you believe that Taylor is going to be the number 1 running back this season?
So I went back before we looked into this prompt, and I checked how many running backs in the past 20 years have had multiple running back 1 finishes by the end of the year. There's a total of 0. There has never been a running back since the year 2000 that has held the position of running back 1 at the end of the year that has repeated it. Right now, Christian McCaffrey has already done that. I believe that if I had the number 1 overall pick, I'm still taking McCaffrey because the floor is just too high. He's pretty much 2 players in 1. But I think Jonathan Taylor has the upside. Last year he finished as the running back 6 in his rookie year. Sophomore year, I expect him to take a big leap up. Especially, he was splitting carries last year. Naeem Hines became a threat out of the backfield. I think this year Jonathan Taylor takes over as the true 3-down back. I think he takes that step up. I think Carson Wentz, in my opinion, is a clear upgrade over Phillip Rivers as a quarterback. I could see Jonathan Taylor finishing it within the top 3. And because of the inconsistency where I saw the stat gap between a running back finishing at the RB1 in multiple seasons over the past 20 years, it led me to believe that Jonathan Taylor truly will finish as the RB1 at the end of the season.
Cody, your thoughts here, Cody? You're not going with you're going with a guy that's the number 1 drafted guy in basically 90% of fantasy leagues. Christian McCaffrey, when he's healthy, is probably the number 1. But why are you taking McCaffrey? Just a little bit on that.
It's Christian McCaffrey. Not much needs to be said. He played 3 games last year, 2 games, went over 30 fantasy PPR points each game. Matt Rule with that offense, he's a freak of nature out of the backfield, catching the ball. He's a pretty good runner. People don't give him enough props for that. If he's healthy this year, he smashes. He will leave every other running back in the dust.
I'm going with Dalvin Cook, a guy who's being drafted at number 2, and I think he wasn't the number 1 fantasy back last year. He was actually number 2. He was number 2 in both touchdowns and both yards when it comes to running backs. Top 3 fantasy back. There's not much to say about him. He's the heartbeat of that offense. They're going to run the ball a lot over there. He can catch the ball. He can run the ball. He's going to get you 20, 25, 30 fantasy points every single week. It's tough to go between him and McCaffrey because McCaffrey's going to get more targets. He's going to get more receptions. And I think the reason I go Cook is although the Vikings aren't a great team, I think the Panthers are one of the worst teams in the league. They're going to finish as a top 10 worst team. They're going to have a top 7, 6, 5 draft pick. if they get down late in games, I'm sure they're going to pass to McCaffrey, but how much work is he going to get? I think the Vikings are a little bit more competitive, so I give Cook the edge a little bit over there when it comes to that. So we're going to move on now to tight ends, and this is pretty self-explanatory. These are your top 3 tight ends going into the season. But Nick, you chose Darren Waller over Kelsey and Kittle, who've been the number 1 and 2 for the past 3 years. So why did you think that Waller's going to take that next step and take the crown out from Travis Kelce?
Look, I think if you go with any of these 3 guys in your draft, you're not going to be disappointed. I think as long as all 3 stay healthy, they're practically locked in to finish, within the top 4. Maybe someone by some miracle breaks into that top 3. But Darren Waller right now feels like the only true target on his team. George Kittle is part of a crowded offense in San Francisco. Brandon Ayuk's going to take that step up. Deebo Samuel's going to take that step up. They seem to like Trey Sermon. They have Raheem Mostert, who's going to be healthy to at least start the year. I think that's just too crowded of an offense right now. Where as much as I love Kittle as a talent, I truly do believe he's the best tight end talent in the NFL. I just think the offense is a little too crowded right now. There's a little bit of uncertainty with Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance for who's going to be the starter. We know Trey Lance will take over at some point. And, Travis Kelce, another part of a crowded offense, even though he has finished, number 1 for multiple or in the top of the conversation for multiple years. I just feel like this is Darren Waller's time to step up and prove that he can be the tight end 1. He truly does feel like the only target on that team. Josh Jacobs, I know, is someone that people are starting to fade because of the rivalry in the backfield now, but he's also not a pass catcher. Nelson Aguilar left the team. It's up to Henry Ruggs to really step up and take that wide receiver 1 role, and I just don't see that potential, which leads me to think that Darren Waller will finish at the number 1 spot.
Cody, you shocked me a little bit with your pick of George Kittle. You had made I don't want to say a negative comment to me last week about him, that he can't stay healthy or whatever it is. So why did you decide on Kittle here instead of Kelce or Waller?
For me, this is the year Kittle stays healthy, I think.
I hope so. I have him in 3 leagues. So Nick talked about Taylor. You talked about Kittle. That's 7 leagues together. I'm hoping you guys are right here and we're not going to fail on this podcast. So let's talk more a little bit about Kittle.
I love George Kittle's upside. When he's on the field, he is an absolute unit. No one on the field can guard him. Kelce, you can put safeties on him because he's not going to blow past you. You can control him a little bit. You're never going to shut Travis Kelce down. But with George Kittle, no one can guard him. You put a linebacker on him, he blows past him. You put a safety on him, he blows past him. George Kittle is the best athlete that is in the NFL at the tight end position. For me, I think he stays healthy. Jimmy G loves throwing to Kittle, over 30% target share. I think when Trey Lance gets that job or whenever that is, I think he's going to favor Kittle even more because what's a quarterback's best friend? The tight end.
A rookie quarterback, we spoke about it on week 1.
I just love George Kittle.
I want to ask you guys, what's the name that we gave this segment? Do you remember? Should I pull it up?
King of the Hill.
There you go. King of the Hill for you that are not watching on video, and you should because we actually did put a lot of nice graphics. The name of the segment is King of the Hill. Travis Kelce's been the king of the fantasy hill 4 out of 5 the last 5 years. He's been the number 1 tight end. I think the only year he wasn't was in 2016 where it was Gronk, and Kelce was number 2 right behind him. Last year he had 1,400 yards and 11 touchdowns. Number 1 among tight ends and top 5 among wide receivers. That's ridiculous. He's putting up wide receiver numbers. He had 100+ receptions for the second time in 3 years. That time that he didn't, he had 97 receptions. He's a PPR machine. He's a red zone monster. There's nobody else in this conversation for me than Travis Kelce as long as him and Mahomes are both healthy. There's just nothing. If you get Travis Kelce, you're playing a wide receiver at tight end. He's worth that pick, that first or second round pick, and he's the only tight end that I'm going to make that case for because he just set it and play. You're worrying about 1 week on the bye. That's
He's 31.
That's it.
He's 31. He's about to be 32.
We're not doing dynasty. We're not doing dynasty. This is what this year. This year, Travis Kelce.
The wall's going to hit him one of these years.
We'll see.
I do like Noah Gray, though. The guy they drafted, the backup tight end. When Travis Kelce steps away or he hits that wall, Noah Gray will explode.
That's a deep sleeper right there for dynasty leagues. I might have to jump on that one. So we just spoke about the players that we really like, and now it's time to tell you guys who we're fading and who we think are going to be the biggest busts of the season. And we're gonna do a little bit of debating on this one, judging by the graphics that we have. So let's get right into it. Cody, I'm going to start with you here. Who do you think is going to be the biggest quarterback bust of the season?
Justin Herbert for me, way overdrafted. Fantastic year last year. Came in on a technicality. Obviously, their trainer punctured poor Tyrod Taylor's lung. Dude just can't catch a break anywhere. Herbert came in, played fantastic, looked great under pressure. Didn't matter. I mean, obviously, he built a connection up with Keenan Allen, who's a fantastic route runner. For me, the head coaching change and what nobody's talking about, the quarterback coach is gone. And Justin Herbert has went on record saying that it is a huge deal to him. Their quarterback coach meant so much to him. He helped him prepare. He helped him get ready for the NFL. He doesn't have that anymore. Obviously, he's a supreme talent, and at this point, there's a lot of quarterbacks that I like. I just think out of the top 10 quarterbacks, he's going to be the bust.
I'm going to go next because me and Nick are going to talk about his pick in a second. I'm going with Lamar Jackson, who was the number 1 fantasy quarterback 2 years ago. Last year, he dropped not to 5, not to 7. He dropped to number 10. His passing yards dropped about 500 yards. His rushing yards are about the same. His passing TDs also dropped, and the interceptions went up. That was when he had a healthy Hollywood Brown. That was when he had a healthy Mark Andrews. He had a healthy rookie running back in J.K. Dobbins. This year, J.K. Dobbins is gone. His rookie wide receiver in Rashad Bateman, he's already out a couple weeks. I don't like anything about this Ravens offense. I don't want to touch anybody on this Ravens offense. Maybe Mark Andrews if you need that tight end and that's who you want to trust, but I don't want any Raven on my team right now. Hollywood hasn't made that next step, and I don't know if he will. There isn't another receiver for Lamar to throw to that he can trust. His throwings looked a little wonky at times. At some point, how long can he run for with that speed? Does he? I don't want to predict an injury because you can't. That's ridiculous. Lamar's been healthy for most of his career, but at some point, if he takes one bad hit and everything's on him, and I think J.K. Dobbins is a bigger loss than most people are accounting for. I think the read option in the red zone, I'm a lot more scared of J.K. Dobbins than I am of Gus Edwards. And even when they run that set where they have 2 running backs in the backfield, it was Dobbins and Edwards. Now it's going to be Dobbins and Taysom Hill, or I forget the other guy that they have is slipping my mind at the moment. But I think Lamar is a guy that I'm just fading. If you're drafting Lamar in round 8, why are you not drafting Dak Prescott? Why are you not drafting Russell Wilson? Why are you not drafting Aaron Rodgers? Do you not trust that guy doesn't have a chip on his shoulder? Ryan Tannehill in round 10, now with Julio Jones, who's actually been a top 5 fantasy quarterback since he's actually entered the league. Since he's got the start job in Tennessee. That's a stat I saw the other day. He's my dark horse for MVP to Tannehill. So there's no way I'm touching Lamar Jackson. If you did touch him in a draft, I hope you drafted Hurts or somebody as your backup, because I wouldn't be comfortable starting Lamar Jackson for all 17 of those weeks, especially when you have that Steelers defense and you have that Cleveland Browns defense, 2 of the top 10 defenses in the league. I'm scared of Lamar Jackson when it comes to starting him. Nick, Josh Allen is my MVP pick. Josh Allen had 37 touchdowns last year. He's in your bust list. What are we doing here, Nick? I need to hear this explanation. I haven't heard it. Just to be clear, I have not heard this explanation. I saw the graphic when Nick sent it to me, and my mouth dropped. So I need to hear this explanation on air. So, Nick, the floor is yours for as long as you need to.
I like it, Nick.
Your job is to convince me. Your job is to convince me as your co-host as to how that guy is going to be a bust and how my opinion was ridiculous 5 minutes ago.
Well, I don't think your take on Josh Allen winning the MVP is, ludicrous. I think that we need a little bit of a realization with who Josh Allen is as a quarterback. Last year, he took a massive step up. He was clearly a better player than he was the year prior, and that's when you inserted someone into an offense as an elite wide receiver that he could rely on down the field. This year, Josh Allen opens this season up. Pittsburgh, Miami, Washington. That's 3 defenses I do not want to play. If you think I'm basing this projection off 3 tough weeks, well, think again. Kansas City, Indianapolis, New Orleans, New England twice, Tampa Bay. That's a bunch of other defenses that Josh Allen is going to see this year. He has 10 games this year where he's going to be playing an extremely tough defense. While I do not think that Josh Allen is going to finish, outside of the top 10, I think drafting Josh Allen at the QB2, you're expecting him to finish as the QB2, QB3. I trust the upside of Kyler Murray with that rushing ability over someone like Josh Allen. I think Mahomes is practically locked in if he stays in healthy, finishes the top 3 quarterback. I think that Lamar, someone you are fading, has the potential still with that rushing upside to finish within that top 3 echelon. Josh Allen is someone, I see the talent, I see the ability, but I also see that schedule, and I see where you have to draft him. And for me to draft him at the QB2 at that ADP, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I'd rather take one of those wide receivers, one of those running backs, one of those tight ends, and I'd feel a lot more comfortable playing them than trusting Josh Allen to finish as a top 2 quarterback this season.
Have you looked at Kyler Murray's schedule or his division?
I have looked at Kyler Murray's schedule, but Josh Allen is also a power rusher. Kyler Murray is a finesse rusher. He's going to slide. He's not going to take those hits. Josh Allen is going to get beaten up this year with those front sevens that he's going to be facing. It's not something that I'm going to be trusting it to finish at as a top 2 quarterback this season.
So you're not worried about the Rams twice or the 49ers twice or Indy? I'm looking at here in the Patriots defense. I know Bill Belichick and all that stuff. I think there's a little bit of overratedness to that Patriots defense at the moment. I'm a Miami believer, and I think they're very good, but I'm taking Josh Allen against Miami. The Steelers and Browns scare me. They definitely are scary defenses, but that's 2 weeks. I don't want to play Aaron Donald twice a year. I'm a Seahawks fan. That dude has been running from Aaron Donald for 10, whatever the number is, 10 years. I don't want to see Kyler Murray against Aaron Donald because that's a problem. And I don't want to see him against Bosa and Armstead and the other guys that they have on that 49ers D-line. So I'm going to rebate this with I think the schedules, if you're putting those 2 quarterbacks, we'd have to have a side-by-side here. But I think I wouldn't want to touch those defenses for sure.
I think that's very fair. But like I said, it's not Josh Allen versus Kyler Murray. It's just, will Josh Allen finish as a top 2 quarterback? I think the likelihood says probably not. And with the ADP, you have to trust him at. Yeah. I think there's other players I'd rather take. So in the avenue of will Josh Allen finish as a top 2 quarterback? In my opinion, probably not. Therefore, I don't think he's worth his ADP. So, if you're let's bring it to a wide receiver position. If you're drafting Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill, they don't finish as a top 2 wide receiver. They're a bust because you took them over a top 10 running back.
That's totally fair. And Cody, I'm going to give you a chance to jump in here.
My reasoning, I agree with Nick. For me, Josh Allen is way too expensive. He was my other option as the quarterback bust. If I'm spending a 3rd round pick or early 4th, I would rather wait 15, 20 picks and take Kyler Murray, who has more upside to me. I don't think Josh Allen can get much better than what he put up last year. 45 touchdowns is a lot. Kyler Murray could rush for 1,000 yards, and I would not be shocked at all. Those yards add up, are a huge addition. Whether it gets in the end zone or not, Kyler's going to have 7 to 10 rushing touchdowns. If he upgrades his passing touchdowns, Kyler Murray is – the sky is the limit. When I say he could break fantasy football, I'm talking break fantasy football. Like NFL or like DFS that I play every week, Kyler Murray will be like, you won't even be able to price him at the same price point. Like they priced Mahomes. You can't even play Mahomes right now. Kyler Murray will be priced up higher than Mahomes by the end of this year. I fully believe it.
And I totally understand the points from you guys. I think it's a big year for Kyler, and I think it's a big year for those Cardinals and Cliff Kingsbury. They're in a very tough division, and it's going to be tough for them to make that playoffs. And if they don't make the playoffs, and it's a rough beat, because if you put the Cardinals in the NFC East, they're winning. They're winning 13 games against. They're winning 6 against the Giants, the football team, the Cowboys, and the Eagles. That's 8 games right there that they're probably going to win. But they're in the NFC, the West. The Seahawks play them very tough. The Rams play them tough. The Niners are tough. Those are 4 teams that are legitimate playoff teams, and 2 very good defenses. And Pete Carroll plays the good defense. He doesn't play defense, but Pete Carroll organizes his defense. He coaches defense defense very, very well, especially against Arizona most of the time. I mean, that week 14, 13 game last year was a very low-scoring game that Kyler didn't play exceptional in. So it's a good debate, and it's a good debate when it comes to ADP of quarterbacks. I don't think any of us three draft quarterbacks early. I just don't think it's anything that we do. So it's a good debate when it comes to those busts. Let's talk about receivers because we have some interesting choices here. We have a guy that had 14 touchdowns last year, another one who had 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns last year, and another one who's Julio Jones. Let's kick it to Cody. Cody, Julio Jones, new team. He was hurt last year. Why is he your bust when it comes to wide receivers?
You said it best. He was hurt last year. I don't think he's healthy. I don't think he can stay healthy. I think the best you're going to get out of Julio Jones is 6 to 10 games. Now, granted, he's an absolute freak. He always has been. I just don't think he's ever going to be healthy again. I would be shocked if he plays double-digit games. What are you going to get out of him in those games? Probably a lot. I mean, he might even pay off his ADP, but then again, he could play 6 games and be gone for you. I'm staying away from Julio Jones.
Nick, Adam Thielen, I didn't even know this. He had 14 touchdowns last year.
Yep.
And Thielen was on my fade list too. Like he was number 2 or 3 behind Lockett. So why are you fading Adam Thielen?
Yeah, it's like you said, the 14 touchdowns, it sounds beautiful. And you look at where he finished last year and you say, this guy where he's being drafted is a little bit of a, not a robbery, but a fair value. But then you also need to take into account 14 touchdowns is ridiculously high for a wide receiver. Adam Thielen will see that natural touchdown regression. I think the Vikings have had a similar last season to the Cowboys of 2 years ago, where their offense was putting up a ton of numbers and points, but because they were playing from behind in most games, I don't think you see that same Minnesota team that you did last year. I think they're in much more competitive games. I think they're winning more. So you're not seeing Thielen rack up yards and late touchdowns like he did last season. So I just think at his value, there's other players that I'd rather be taking.
For me, it pains me as a Seahawks fan, but I think Tyler Lockett's a fade this year. He had 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns last year, which is great. It's great for fantasy numbers.
6 touchdowns in 2 games.
7 games. He had under 50 yards. I believe out of those 7, I think 4 of them were like 30 yards or under. That's not consistency when it comes to fantasy football. When you're drafting Tyler Lockett around 4 or 5, around guys like Cooper Kupp and Deontay Johnson, who gets 10 receptions a game, you're drafting Tyler Lockett over some guys that are probably going to be more consistent from you. So I think you're only getting 2 or 3 games out of Tyler Lockett where he has 100 yards and a touchdown or 2. So I can't take him at that ADP. I think Lockett's a phenomenal football player. I really do. And I also think that if you had a bonus in fantasy football for clutch catches or big time catches like +5, Tyler Lockett's up the board. Because when Russell Wilson needs a big play, even if it's a 5-yard touchdown on 4th down, Tyler Lockett's usually the guy. But you don't get a bonus for that. That's not how fantasy works. So Tyler Lockett to me is a fade. Running backs, we 2 of us have 2 of the same here. Cody and Nick both have the same running back. So I'm going to let Cody start first. Josh Jacobs, why is he a fade for you?
For me, each year, all I hear about is, Josh Jacobs. Everyone's gushing over him. Haven't heard anything this year. They actually brought in Kenyon Drake. It's the opposite. Last year, I kept hearing, oh my gosh, he looks so good catching the ball out of the backfield. He's going to catch so many passes. We're not going to use anybody else. He's going to be our horse. He played 2 third downs in their first game. He was on the field for 2 third downs. Sorry. For me, he's a guy. He's just a dude. He's going to rush for 1,000 yards, maybe get close to it, maybe get you 8 to 10 touchdowns. He offers nothing in the passing game. For me, PPR leagues, no thank you.
Nick, you want to piggyback off that? You also have Josh Jacobs as your bust running back this year.
Yeah, it's the same exact thing. In a PPR format, I'm not trusting Josh Jacobs as a pass catcher out of the backfield. Josh Gruden ran a very strange scheme last year where they had Devontae Booker run, I don't remember if it was the entire season.
It was every other drive he put in a different running back. It's almost like the 49ers are doing with quarterbacks at the moment.
That's just a coach that I cannot trust playing, a running back with no receiving upside in a PPR format. Josh Jacobs is someone I'm steering clear of this year.
For me, it's DeAndre Swift. I just see red flag after red flag after red flag.
Such a bummer.
He was 39th in rushing yards last year. His new running back teammate, Jamal Williams, had, I think, 40 less yards than Swift, and he was behind Aaron Jones, who's a stud. Swift is dealing with a groin injury in camp already that he's dealt with both in college and in the past. That's something that doesn't seem to be going away. His offensive coordinator, Anthony Lynn, that's been with the Chargers, likes using those multiple running backs. I just don't want to draft him at his ADP. I want to get my running backs early. I want to get my running backs early like I have in every draft. But if DeAndre Swift is on the board, I'd rather take a receiver and wait for a Javonte Williams or a Trey Sermon, somebody that I think is more upside than the DeAndre Swift, who I don't think plays all his games this year. And if he does, I just don't think he's going to get you as many points as you think he is. I'd rather go with Carson. I'd rather go with Chris Carson, or I'd rather go with David Montgomery, or even Myles Gaskin at that point, who I think is going to be the head of that committee, and I don't think it's going to be a big committee. But Cody, I want you to jump in here because I know Swift is a little bit more on your happy side.
I love DeAndre Swift. I love his upside. He's so talented, but this groin issue is really starting to worry me. He's a guy I'm still actively seeking out in Dynasty very much. And I'm starting to see his ADP really fall. Like, if he falls into the 5th round, that's too low for a guy that's as gifted as DeAndre Swift. He is going to concede some touches to Jamal Williams, who's a fantastic pass catcher, same with Swift. They're going to throw a ton. It wouldn't shock me if both of them are out there catching balls, but the groin injury scares me a little bit, especially for redraft leagues. It really does.
Yeah, fifth league I could do, but I've seen him going 3rd round, 4th round. I can't do that when Carson and Montgomery and Gaskin are on the board. Well, I could trust more. Our last position for bust is tight ends. Nick, I'm going to go with you first. Noah Fant. I know a listener out there who's not going to be happy about this one, but why is Noah Fant your fade when it comes to tight end?
Forget about a listener. Think about a co-host that's going to be a little upset with
that's true. That's true. Nick's brother Andreas loves the Broncos and he loves Noah Fant, so that's our listener right there.
Yeah, exactly. Look, Noah Fant, like I said in our first episode, he's a guy, tight end 8. There's just guys I trust in later rounds. I see the talent there. I just do not trust that offense. I do not trust Teddy Bridgewater to find a good balance between Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Noah Fant. I don't see the offense being productive enough where Noah Fant's going to be a red zone threat consistently enough where he's going to see the touchdowns that you look for out of the tight end position. You can't even stack him with the quarterback because I viewed Teddy Bridgewater as unstartable unless if you were playing someone like the Texans or the Lions, and even then I'd look to other options that have more talent. Noah Fant's just someone I will not be drafting at this ADP. If it were something like a dynasty league where you could have, bank on the hope of Rodgers maybe getting there, Watson getting there through a trade, them drafting someone else, maybe look for that because the talent definitely is there with Fant. But with the quarterback situation there and the question marks all around that team of who's going to be the leader, I'm just really not trusting Noah Fant as that guy this year.
Cody, I'll give you a second to rebuttal and then give me your tight end fade for the year.
I really can't disagree. I love Noah Fant. His talent level is ridiculous. But he's had an ankle injury his first 2 years. His ankle is already bothering him this year. The same ankle. I don't know. I love his upside though. If he was going to put it all together, he's a top 5 tight end. But I just don't know if he ever will. Just health wise mostly. But going right into my guy, I went with Robert Tonyan. For me, he's going to have massive touchdown regression. That's the first thing. The second thing is he was barely getting any targets. He was only being targeted like 4 or 5 times a game, and he was falling into the end zone almost every week. Now, granted, he has Aaron Rodgers throwing him the football. That helps anyone that's catching the ball. But Aaron Rodgers had something like a 9.6% touchdown percentage. 1 in every 10 passes was a touchdown for Aaron Rodgers. That's ridiculous. That is like a full 3% higher than he's ever had. Robert Tonyan will be lucky to get half the touchdowns he had last year. Even if he catches a couple more balls, I still have him outside the top 10.
For me, it's Rob Gronkowski. Rob Gronkowski's a name that we've had in fantasy football for the past 10 years or so, but Rob's the guy that late in the draft, one of your league mates is going to say, oh, Gronk. He's Gronk. I'm going to take him. Don't do that. Don't be that guy. Because Gronk is competing with a ridiculous offense, the best offense in the NFL. So let's start with this. You're competing with Mike Evans, 1,000 yards for 7 straight seasons. You're competing with Chris Godwin, who's going to get 80 receptions or so. You're competing with Antonio Brown. He had 45 targets last year, 45 receptions in 8 games, I think.
Way up.
Yeah, Antonio Brown last year, if he played all 16 games, would have averaged 80 targets, or 80 receptions, I should say. And then you look at the tight end room. Cameron Brate. Brady loves throwing to him. O.J. Howard's coming off of injury. I don't know how good he's going to be, but it's another tight end. They have 2 running backs in Rojo and Fournette. I cannot start Gronk. He's tight end or bust. I can't. I need to start a tight end that I think can get a couple targets, a couple receptions, and maybe a touchdown. Gronk is just not the guy that you could start anymore, at least when it comes to these tight ends. But speaking about the Buccaneers, we're going to kick it to Thursday night football. The season is officially here, 2 days away. We're very excited. We don't have a show on Thursday, so this is going to be your Thursday night football preview. We're going to run through over-unders for each player, each position. So let's get to it. We're going to start off with the quarterbacks. 2 great quarterbacks right here. In Tom Brady and Dak Prescott. So Dak's over for you guys that aren't watching the video, and probably should. We're going to have these graphics out on Twitter anyway. Dak's projection, according to ESPN in full PPR leagues, is 23.7. Brady's is 24.0. Cody, I'll start with you. Why did you go with Dak for under, and why did you go with Brady for over?
For me, I haven't seen anything from Dak Prescott since his gruesome ankle injury. I don't trust this team until I see it. I fully understand their defense is terrible. When he played last year, we all referred to their offense as a fantasy carnival because they just slung it around the yard because their defense was just giving up touchdowns left and right. For me, against this defense, I'm not touching Dak Prescott. The over is just too high. I mean, he's going to have to throw 3 touchdowns to get that. Granted, he might get close to 250, 300 yards. I just don't see him getting 3 touchdowns to boost him over that. And on Tom Brady, it's Tom Brady. He's facing arguably the worst defense in the NFL, pass defense-wise, with a full repertoire of wide receivers. I think he absolutely feasts on this defense. And then in the running back column you're about to see, you'll see one of the running backs who I have over with a lot of second-half garbage touches.
Nick, you went over, so you're projecting a very high-scoring opening kickoff game for Thursday night. So why did you go over for both of these quarterbacks?
Look, I think the NFL was very smart making this the first game. Obviously, you have Super Bowl champions led by Tom Brady, Dak's comeback story with America's team. But the real reason is because we know that both these teams have elite offenses. You know, we don't know what Dak will be coming back from injury, and it's definitely a tough week 1 matchup. But Dak was the king of garbage time last year in the 4 or 5 games that he played. The year before that was also a king of garbage time. You know, it's something that I think that he's just going to blow through the water in the second half of the game once he gets his stride going. And, you know, he realizes I got a top 10 running back. I got 3 great receivers I can rely on. I got a good tight end I can rely on. I think he's just going to start to feel that comfort come the second half. And when garbage time hits, they're going to start making that comeback. And you're going to see those points rise. I mean, Tom Brady's going up against, in my opinion, the worst defense in the NFL. I think that they're absolutely horrendous, even with the addition of Dan Quinn at DC. Their first game, Micah Parsons is not going to slide in immediately and make that game 1 impact against Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time. I think Brady just throws the ball all over the field and finds that end zone so many times.
I went over for Dak because of the garbage time. I think he's going to have a rough first few series, but I think there's a chance that in garbage time, the Bucs do pull some of the starters. I think he's going to rack up those yards and find his groove that Nick said. So I think Dak's going to have a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns, at least 3-4 of them. As for Tom Brady, I think that they're going to get that lead early. And in most ESPN full PPR leagues, a touchdown's only 4 points. You're banking on 6 touchdowns. I don't think so. I think he gets 3 or 4. And even if it's 4 and he's at 16, he's got to get another 8 points. I think 24 is actually a really solid number, but if I had to pick over under, I don't think he's getting close to 28 points. I think he's getting closer to 23 to 25. These running backs are really interesting. Is Zeke going to eat, or is he's going to get thrown out of the table? So Cody, you're taking Zeke not to eat in this game, under 15.5. So Zeke is 15.5. Leonard Fournette, playoff Lenny, Super Bowl Lenny is 9.5. And then Rojo is 9.1 fantasy points. So, Cody, why are you going with the under for Zeke?
For me, at 15.2, Zeke has to score a touchdown. Against that Russian defense, I don't see him scoring a touchdown. He's going to catch a couple balls. Is it going to be enough to get him? He's still going to need 70, 80 yards rushing. I think he's going to end up with more like 25 to 50 rushing yards. I think they're going to fully abandon the run by the middle to the end of the second quarter. I just don't see him catching enough passes. He does lead the league in inside the 5 carries. But against that rush defense, I just do not see him getting to that 15.2 number. As for the Buccaneers, I do not like Leonard Fournette. I've made it wildly known. He's a playoff. It's playoff Lenny. He shows up when you need him. Otherwise, he's taking some weeks off. He doesn't really care about it. I have him under 9.8. Going to have to get a touchdown. In this game, so one of these running backs to go over is going to have to get a touchdown. I think second half they're going to run the football a lot, which is why I went under on Leonard Fournette. And I think Ronald Jones is the one that gets in the end zone, and he goes over his 9.1 point projection.
I'm going to jump in here. I'm also going the under for Zeke. I think he's not going to be sitting at the dinner table tonight. He's taking a meal off. I agree with Cody. You need a touchdown here for Zeke, and I think the game script isn't good for him. I don't really trust him in the 5-yard line. And if Dak isn't 100%, if he's not playing well, which I just predicted that he is, but in the case that he's not, I'm not trusting Zeke in this one. You have to play him. He's a first-round pick, but it's a bad matchup. I'm going over for playoff Lenny because I do think he's going to get a touchdown. He's the bigger back. He's the goal line back. So I think he gets that touchdown. That's 6 points right there. Just has to get a couple more runs. Yeah, I think he gets like one reception in like 20 yards or whatever. Like, I'm going with playoff Lenny. Rojo, I think that Lenny gets most of the carries. I think he's going to get the goal line carries. So I don't like that 9.1 number for Rojo. Nick, you're totally different than us when it comes to Zeke. So why do you think that Zeke is going to feast in this one?
Yeah, to jump off what Cody said, it's really going to come down to can he hit the end zone. I think he will find his way in there. I think Dak's going to be passing the ball down the field. Zeke leads the league and within the 5 rushing attempts. I think he will find the end zone. And then from there, all he really needs is those 3 checkdowns that Dak's going to have to do to get back into his rhythm at the start of the game. And then from there, you're looking at just 50 yards, and he's roughly at that 15-point mark. I don't see him having a boom game. I'm not expecting him to go for 25, 30, but I think 15 is a very fair number. I think he just breaks it a little bit. When we go over to Fournette and Rojo, I think Fournette will find the end zone pretty early. I think Tampa will have no problem getting down the field. I think that Ronald Jones will not have much of an impact at all as the season starts to progress. I think early on, I don't know if Gio is healthy, so there was some injury concern about him, but if he's on the field, I think it's going to take away from Rojo, not from Fournette being on the field. So Rojo is someone I'm very much steering clear of in every game this year.
All right, and lastly, we have 6 pretty damn good receivers in this matchup. So, the over-unders here, we have CeeDee Lamb's at 15.6, Amari Cooper's at 15.8, Michael Gallup's at 13.2. On the Bucs side, Mike Evans is 15.7, Chris Godwin 14.5, and Antonio Brown 11.8. Nick, I'm going to start with you on this one. Why did you decide to go with some of these over-unders? Who's going over? Who's going under? There's too many to read off for the audio listeners. We're going to have it the graphics up there, and Nick will explain it better. But Nick, why did you decide to go with your choices at least?
Yeah, so piggybacking off what I said about Zeke, he's going to be the check down guy, early on as Dak gets into his rhythm. Amari Cooper is a very elite route runner. I think he's going to get those quick routes off against that Bucs secondary, and they're going to look to target him early. I think he'll end up hitting the over on that 15.8 number. CeeDee Lamb, another guy you'll probably find a lot in the slot. I think he's just going to eat a lot of targets in this game. They're going to be passing the ball the entire game because they'll be playing from behind. And I think that CD will hit that number. Michael Gallup, you're really banking on him burning someone in this game. I just don't see it happening. I don't think Dak is going to look to air it out. I don't think that Mike McCarthy is going to look to target downfield as often as possible with Dak in his first game back from injury. So Gallup's not someone that I could think can hit that 13.2 without finding the end zone. Mike Evans, 15.7. There is no one in that secondary that's going to stop Mike Evans from getting what he wants in the red zone. I think I can see Mike Evans racking up multiple touchdowns in this game very easily against the secondary. And I think 15.7, I would bank on him hitting the over just on the red zone work alone. Chris Godwin, the only one that I have hitting the under. Godwin is someone that I've been lower on than these two going into the season. Like I said, I think this offense is way too crowded. Someone's just not going to be able to, get their seat at the dinner table. And I think this is the game where you just won't see Godwin do it. They're not going to be passing the ball late into the game. So we're going to see how it folds. And then, Antonio Brown only at 11.8. I think that's extremely low. I think he's going to see a ton of targets in this game. I think he sees a ton of targets on the season. And I think Antonio Brown really takes over with that, and hits that 11.8 very easily.
All right, Cody, why did you decide to go with the over-unders for some of these players?
For me, just like what I said with Dak Prescott, I think it's going to come down to Tampa Bay absolutely mauling Dallas and then them playing a lot of catch-up. I just don't know how healthy Dak Prescott is. I went over on CeeDee Lamb just because he's going to be open. You watched the tape last year. CeeDee Lamb was always open. He had absolute bums throwing him the ball. Sorry, Andy Dalton, but you were a bum last year. With that many weapons on that offense, you can't put up numbers, you're a bum. Ben DiNucci, not even on the team anymore. Awful. CeeDee Lamb looked good with those guys. You put him with Dak Prescott, he's going to look good. He lives in that 10 to 15-yard range. That's where they're going to have to live. They're not going to burn Tampa Bay deep with their secondary. Like Nick said, Michael Gallup needs that long bomb. Don't think he's getting that. I'm under on 13.2. Amari Cooper, 15.8. I'm right there. I think he's going to end up around the 14 or 15 range. I just don't see him getting over that. As for the Buccaneers, I am over on all of them. I think each one of these guys score a touchdown. 11.8 points for Antonio Brown is an absolute crime. That is arguably the most egregious projection of the first week of the season. That's 5 catches for 60 yards with no touchdown. He's going to go for 18 to 20. He's going to catch 6 or 7 balls. If he gets in the end zone, he's going over 20. He's going to double that projection. Chris Godwin, he's the one guy I could see not getting in the end zone, even though he's looked the best in the preseason. All you need from him is 6 catches, 60 yards. He's under that 14.5 at that rate. 6 for 60 is 12 points. But I do think he gets in the end zone. That pushes him on the over. And also piggybacking off Nick, nobody's going to be able to guard Mike Evans. He could score 3 touchdowns. What are they going to put? Trevon Diggs on him? Like, Evans has 5 inches and 50 pounds on that kid who got roasted all of last year. Mike Evans, I predict in the first quarter, he's burning somebody. He's catching a 50-yard touchdown. And he's going to beat this projection in his first catch.
I'm playing devil's advocate. I think Evans is only hanging around 13, 14 points. I don't think he gets a touchdown in this game. I think it's the show with AB and Chris Godwin. I'm looking at the targets here because last year Mike Evans had 70 receptions at least, and Godwin missed a couple games. Godwin missed I think 4 or 5 games, and he had 65 receptions. Antonio Brown, I spoke about his targets. He was on pace for 80 if he played the whole game. So I think Godwin and AB both get fed this game with targets, so that's why I have both of them over and Evans under. But I think Cody has a legitimate point when it comes to that. I just think Evans needs that end zone, whereas Godwin and AB can meet their projection and probably get 5 more points without it. Correct. Yeah. CeeDee Lamb are all over. We spoke about that. Gallup are all under. Nuts. I'm under for Amari. I like Cody's projection when it comes to 14, 13. I think he's right there. I think he needs the end zone just like Mike Evans. So that's our Thursday night football preview. I hope that helped you guys out a little bit, and you should be playing most of these guys. But now we're going to talk about our breakout players. We've each selected a player that we've drafted in at least 4 leagues, I believe. So we're each going to talk about our breakout player and why we believe that this player could help us win a fantasy football championship. So Cody, I'm going to go with you first. You picked one of your Broncos. Why do you believe that Jerry Jeudy is going to be your breakout star for 2021?
I love this kid. He's my favorite player in the NFL. As a Oklahoma Sooner fan, last year's draft came around. Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb were there. I said they have to take Jerry Jeudy. The kid is just special when it comes to running routes, when it comes to getting better. I think his ADP is 75. His wide receiver, he's coming off the board at wide receiver 30. I think that's 10 picks too late. At least 10 picks too late. I think he ends up as a high-end wide receiver too, maybe in that early 20, maybe reaches the late teens, depending on how much Teddy Bridgewater relies on him. I think this is the year Jerry Jeudy is absolutely going to feast, because Teddy Bridgewater is going to look his way early, often, late, don't matter when. Jerry Jeudy will be open, and he will get a lot of catches this year.
How many leagues do you have him in out of the amount of leagues that you're in, at least?
I'm in between Dynasty and Redraft. I believe I'm in 8 or 9 leagues. I have him in every league but one.
There you go.
I have him in every Dynasty league. He's a top 10 wide receiver in Dynasty easily.
Well, Cody, for you, I hope he does play very well, unless you are facing me. Nick, I want to go to you, because this is a player that I've actually liked a lot this season. He's a guy who's being drafted really, really late. So why did you decide to go with this player as your sleeper for this season?
So look, the Atlanta Falcons are bringing in a new offensive coordinator, and they let go of their best wide receiver that they potentially, you could very much argue was the greatest in their history of the franchise. Russell Gage is going to step up as that wide receiver too. We all know Kyle Pitts is a threat, and in the draft they reinforce that offense is the way that they are going to run things in Atlanta. I think Russell Gage, it's a team that's going to be behind in a lot of games. Matt Ryan is going to get those yards. He's going to need someone between the 20s. It was Julio Jones for many years. I think Russell Gage is going to have to step up and assume that role. I think Pitts, Ridley, and Gage are all going to benefit. But right now, where Russell Gage is being drafted as the wide receiver 62, I think is so criminally low. I think Russell Gage has the potential to finish as a wide receiver 3, possibly a wide receiver 2, if he could keep that production up within the 20s. Only 3 years into the league, age 25, still young, still has that potential to hit that high upside. And just being at the wide receiver 62, absolutely ridiculously low. There's only one league where I wasn't able to get him. It's because somebody listened to me in a conversation a week earlier and reached on three rounds too early. But even 3 rounds too early is somewhere I feel comfortable with this player.
How many leagues are you in, and how many do you have him in?
I've drafted in 5 leagues so far. I got 2 drafts left. I got him in 4 of them. The only one I don't, someone reached on him and took him before me. So no problem with that one.
There you go. So for me, it's a guy that I've drafted in 4 leagues. A couple of people think I'm absolutely nuts for being so high on this guy, but I love Darnell Mooney. His ADP is 152.3. He's the wide receiver 59. I think that's ridiculous. I've taken him in round 12 or 10 or whatever, because I think he's going to be that good. In his rookie season last year, he had 600 yards, 4 touchdowns, 60 receptions in that year, and he only had 2 drops. He had a terrible quarterback situation, and he had 2 drops. There are videos out there of him burning the number 1 corner in the league, Jalen Ramsey, and the only reason that's not a highlight with a catched ball is because of the quarterback situation.
The ball was 30 yards past him.
It wasn't Darnell Mooney's fault.
No.
Darnell, I don't have the stat here, but he also was one of the leaders in the league of uncatchable balls as to when he was open. I think he was top 5 in that.
You want to know who was number 1?
Who was it?
Jerry Jeudy.
There you go. Mooney was also 4th most in missed tackles, so even when he does get the ball, he's making people miss. Nagy compared him to guys like Tyreek Hill and Deshaun Jackson, so I'm all in on Darnell Mooney. I think if you got him in rounds 10 to 12, he's going to eat up those targets that Anthony Miller had last year. He's going to be a really nice complement to Allen Robinson, and once Justin Fields takes the field by week 6 or 8 or whatever it is, I think this offense is going to get rolling a little bit, and Mooney's going to get a lot of targets. He had 60 last year, 60 receptions, I should say. I think he's getting closer to 80 or 90 this year. He's the wide receiver 59 here. I think he's finishing top 40. He's going to be top 30, top 40. He's going to be somewhere around there, and I have a lot of confidence in my pick right there. So those are our sleepers for the year. Hopefully you guys have some of these sleepers, and hopefully they help both you and us win some fantasy championships. That is our show for today, our last show before the first game of the NFL season. We are all very, very, very excited about that one. We'll be tweeting along with you guys as the game goes on, and hopefully it's a big fantasy day for all of us. Do you guys have anybody playing in that game? I have Cooper. I have Chris Godwin. Cody, do you have anybody playing Thursday night?
I have Michael Gallup as my
keeper.
I'm not playing him.
You're not playing him.
Oh no! I have Antonio Brown. He's going to cover what Michael Gallup wouldn't cover for me.
Nick, what about you? Do you have anybody playing?
Between all my leagues, I
think you have Cooper in one at least.
I have Cooper. I think in our league, I have Zeke in our league. I had to make the decision between Dak and Tom Brady in another league. Still,
I have CD in a couple leagues, but
I got Lamb in a few. A good balance of a lot of those weapons we talked about.
So we all got a couple then. Okay, cool. Well, that is. There we go. Yeah. That is our show for today. Thank you guys for listening. Again, you could find us on the audio on all podcasting platforms at this point, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. If you're an Apple 5-star review, leave one, please, please, please. And if you leave a review, tweet us. We'll retweet it. If you're finding us on social media, it's PrimeTimeFFPod on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and also on Facebook at Primetime Fantasy Podcast. If you do like the show, please let us know on social media. We'll give you a retweet, a follow, whatever you want, because we do appreciate all that interaction. If you have any questions, we're going to do a mailbag segment for Friday show and also Sunday show that's live. So if you have any fantasy questions, and even if we don't answer them on the show, we'll always answer them on the Twitter. We all get the notifications, and we'll let you know who's helping you out. Live show Sunday, again, we'll remind you on Friday, but please join in. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, live show 11 a.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern time for daily fantasy and for your last start and sit. Cody, before we get out of here, anything you want to say, anything you want to plug?
I'm just super excited. I can't wait for Saturday. I can't wait for Sunday NFL season. There's nothing better than the NFL season. When it kicks off, everything kicks off. DFS Corner on Sunday. It's going to be awesome. So many mispriced guys on DraftKings. I don't really play on FanDuel that much, so I mostly look at DraftKings. So we'll definitely take a look at that. But I can't wait. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I typically post about DFS winnings or bad beats or movies sometimes, or really just whatever, some funny stuff, not much. It's at CRepassDFS.
The ads all there, and if you're watching the video, the ads are all there.
See it the whole time.
Nick, how about you? Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Yeah, like Nick said, check us out on all our social medias. We are very active. We'll be responding. We'll take a look. You have questions, you're going to get them answered on the show. Take a look through. Keep involved with us. Keep in touch. I think all three of us can say we're super excited. Football season's finally here. We're looking forward to it for since the last touchdown of the year. We've been looking forward to it since the Super Bowl.
I want to give a quick shout out to Nick, who did all the graphics for this show and every show. He's done really, he sent us that draft graphic the other day, and I was out at Universal. My mouth dropped.
Yeah, so good.
Nick's been phenomenal. So a quick shout out to Nick for that. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at @TheNickGiacobbe. I post about everything I like: movies, TV shows, not Twitter, sports, wrestling, whatever it is.
Nick Cap, you're going down in week 1.
Oh, we'll see about that.
We'll talk about that on Friday.
You won the Twitter poll, but I'm winning the week 1 matchup.
We'll talk about that on Friday. That is our show for today. Thank you guys again, and we'll talk to you in a few days.